A good way to add interactivity to any application is to hide or show different parts of the user interface based on a condition. Angular gives us some really good tools to do this, and in this lecture we'll put them to use. Alright, so as the final step in getting the main application structure in place, why don't we put in an area within each card that has the contact information for whoever is listing this classified. And at the same time, we can also start to put in some controls that would be used by an administrator to edit or delete any of these listings. So for this, we'll make use of some of Angular's other built-in directives. And I'm going to do a little bit of demonstration for you before we get too far in. So what we'll need in this case is to make use of Angular's ng-show and ng-hide directives. And eventually we'll make use of the ng-click directive to listen for a click event as well. And so let's see how these work. Let's come maybe down here below the toolbar a little bit. And let's just put in something to give us a little example. Maybe a p tag, you can put your name in there. And if I come back over and refresh, we see that it's coming through right here. I can conditionally hide and show this really easily by using Angular's ng-show or ng-hide directive. So let's see how we can do this. We can say that we want this p tag to be shown if something is true or false. So just as an example, we can say ng-show equals true, and that will be shown. And then we can also say ng-show equals false, and now it won't be shown. And how this works is that ng-show looks for a true or false value to either show or hide the element that it's on. So let's create maybe just a local property on our data model, and we'll call it maybe show name. And so when this show name property is true, then this whole p tag will be shown, and when it's false, it will be hidden. And the way that we can maybe switch that up just on the fly here, let's try putting in a button. So we can just put in a standard button, and here we'll make use of the ng-click directive. So ng-click is going to be equal to something, and in this case we want to say that when the user clicks this button, show name is going to be set to true. And so let's say show name here in the button. We'll come back over and refresh, and right now you see we get the button, but we don't get the name showing up. But if we click show name, there it is, the name shows up right here. And so what happened again is that this ng-click directive is saying that when clicked, set a property, a local property on the data model called show name to true. And our name element down here has an ng-show directive, which says conditionally show this element if the show name property is set to true. And so let's see how we can do the inverse of this. We could also do another button, and this one's going to have an ng-click as well. And we'll say in this case, show name is equal to false. So we can say hide name. Okay, so we'll come back over and refresh, and now we've got our extra button. So we can click show name, and there it is, and then we'll also click hide name, and it goes away. So hopefully that makes sense. What we're doing essentially is saying that anytime this show name property is set to true, then we want this p tag to be shown, and anytime that it's set to false, we want it to be hidden. And so I also mentioned there's an ng-hide directive, and basically this is just the inverse of ng-show. So let's see this at work. We do ng-hide there. Let's come back and refresh. We see that we've got my name showing here. And so if we were to say show name, I would expect this to disappear now because we basically just flipped everything. And so sure enough, it does so. And then if we click hide name, I would expect it to show up because again, we've flipped everything around. And there we go. Okay, so let's see how we can put this into practice now for our card. So let's get rid of all of this. And let's come down here, and I'm just going to create a little bit more space. And maybe right here we can put in another div. And this div is going to have a class of classified contact. This is going to be the contact information for each of the classified ads. So in here, let's do a p tag, and then within that, why don't we do an icon? So we'll do md icon, and this icon is going to have a class of mdi and also mdi account. All right, we'll close that off, and then within this p tag, what we want to show is the contact name. And if we remember back over here in our data, we've got this contact object, and we've got some properties like name, phone number, and email. So let's access those. So down here within the first p tag, let's put in the name. So we can just do our standard templating, and here we'll do classified contact name. All right, and so I'm actually just going to copy all of this and come down to the next line, and I'll paste it in twice because we want the same thing essentially on the next two lines, but this one will change over to be an icon of a phone, and this one is going to be the email, so we'll say email there. And then we can just make the same change right here and right here. All right, let's see how that looks. Coming back over to refresh. There we go. We've got all of the contact information showing up there. But I think what we want to do is maybe not show this information until the user clicks something to say that they want to see it. So why don't we put in an ng-show on our classified contact div to say that we want to conditionally show it. So up here, right beside our class name, let's put in ng-show. And that's going to be equal to maybe a property called show contact. And so thinking back to the examples we just did, whenever this show contact property is set to true, this area is going to be shown. By default, when the page loads, it's not going to be set to true. So if we're to come over here, I expect it not to be shown. So now what we'll want is a button that sets the show contact property to true when the user wants. So let's head back over here and let's come down below this div. And what we'll do is put in another div. And just to properly format things, let's say layout here is equal to row. And again, that's going to allow us to get whatever's in here, whatever's in the div tags, to show up horizontally instead of vertically. Let's put in a new MD button. And this button is going to have an ng click that says show contact is equal to true. And then we'll close that off and we'll put in contact as the text within that button. Okay, so let's copy all of that and come down to the next line. And this one's going to do the inverse. This one's going to hide it. So in this case, we'll say show contact is equal to false. And maybe for the wording here, we can just put details because that's going to take us back to the details of the classified ad. All right, so we'll save that and let's test it out. So coming back over and we'll refresh. Let's click contact and you see we've got all of the contact information showing up, and we can go back to details and we just get this. All right, so that's going to work, but as it stands, whenever we click this contact button, we're going to get the contact information, which is all coming out right here. We're going to have that showing up, but we're still going to have all of these details showing up as well. So why don't we put an ng-show on this div as well? What we can do is put ng-show here. And we can say that this one's going to be equal to not show contact, the inverse of show contact. And it's probably worth mentioning here that the show contact property is going to have a value of true or false. And that's how we're able to just simply list the property name to get our conditional showing or hiding. The long form of doing this would be to say ng-show when show contact is equal to true. That would kind of be the long form, but it works just as well to say that we want it to show simply when show contact, because this is going to evaluate to true when this button is clicked. Similarly, instead of putting the negation in front of our show contact property here, we could say show this area when ng contact is equal to false. But the negation works to make it a little bit shorter. So we'll put back our exclamation to say show this area when show contact is equal to false. Okay, so let's save this and let's check it out in the browser. If we refresh, what we'll see is we've got our contact and our details buttons. If we click contact, the other area that we were just on, the details, is hidden, and the contact information for whoever posted the ad shows up. And then if we click details, we get all of our information back. So there we go. That is how we conditionally show or hide different elements within our Angular template. And so just before we finish, let's put in one last thing. We'll put in the administration area. We'll just make an assumption that whoever's using this is an administrator just to see how things work. So what we'll need is a little administration area that has some extra controls within each of the classifieds. So let's head back over and right down here below our buttons, let's put in another area. This one's going to be the classified admin area. So we'll do div with a class of classified admin. And we can put in a heading. Let's do an H3, and it's going to be admin. And then a div within here, and that div's going to take a layout of row. Again, so everything shows up horizontally. And then we can put in some more controls. Let's do MD button, and this one's going to have a class of MD primary as the primary color. And for now, let's just call this the edit button, and then we'll copy this and we'll come over here, and instead of MD primary this time, let's do MD warn, because this is going to be the delete button. So we're going to say delete in this one. And this is another spot that we want to conditionally show or hide. So this time, instead of using ng-show, let's use another one of Angular's directives called ng-if. And ng-if is kind of like ng-show, but what it does is it removes this whole div from the DOM anytime that a condition is false, and it inserts it into the DOM anytime a condition is true. Whereas here, the ng-show directive is simply using CSS to hide whatever this ng-show is applied to. So once again, ng-if is going to actually remove this from the DOM. So the condition we'll want to meet here is if show admin is set to true. Once again, if we want it to be verbose, we could say show admin should be true if this condition is met, but we can also just leave it as show admin. So now this means we need another control to set show admin to true. So if we come down here below this button, let's just copy this one and we can paste it below. This one should be the admin area button. So we'll activate the admin area when this button is clicked. And to do that, of course, we need to set show admin to true here instead of show contact. So this button is going to set show admin to true. And then we actually can just come down here below this one and we can make this button close the admin area. So we'll say close, and this one is going to set show admin to false. Okay, so if we save that, let's come back over to see how it looks. And right away we see that it's kind of running off of each of the contact cards. And we can fix this in a number of ways, but what we should really do is conditionally show or hide these buttons themselves. For instance, if we are in the contact area for our card, well, we don't really need the contact button to still show up because we're already there. We need the details button, but we don't need that contact button. The same goes for admin. If we're in the admin area, which we can see here, we don't need this admin button showing up at all. So let's fix that up. Coming back over here, what we need to do is put an ng-show on each of these buttons. All right, so we've got to put an ng-show on each of these buttons to conditionally show and hide them. And when the lines start to get a little bit long for the HTML, I like to break things out onto new lines. So we'll just do this and break out our button HTML onto a new line. So down here below the ng-click, I'm going to do ng-show when the show contact property is false. That's when we want to have this button be shown. And I'll fix this up a little bit here, just bring the end of the MD button opening tag up to the line above. All right, same thing goes for the details button. So let's break this down onto a new line and this one as well. So down below here, what we can do is say this should be shown, and we'll use ng-show of course. This should be shown when show contact is true. That's when we want to see this details button. All right, let's give it a bit more space here, and we'll bring this one down. And so here, what we'll do is we will say we want to show this button when show admin is false. And then I'm sure you can guess the last one. This one is going to be shown when show admin is true. All right, so let's save that and see how it looks. So if we refresh, if we click the contact button, we get our contact details, but that contact button has now been hidden. And if we click details, we get back to that details area and the details button is hidden. Similarly for the admin area, if I click it, we get the admin area and we've got our close button now, but not the admin button. So we've still got a bunch to do in our application. We've got to have a way to add listings and to edit and delete listings. But before that, we're going to take a look at Angular's HTTP service to get our data from a remote source. And we'll do that in the next section.